And then what you need to ask yourself is, would I be happy with that? So it's all based on trust. I think it's a fear of the impact and the cost on the business that it'll have. A bit like a game of Jenga. As soon as people start knocking bricks out of that trust wall, it is a little bit hard. That was my personal data. Would I be happy with my data processed in that way? I think on another level, I think a lot of it is fear. We are into 2026 building our strategic partnerships. At least put some training provision in around GDPR so that, you're helping your own business. But secondly to that, the risks that are involved.
Welcome to the Making It Simple podcast. My name's Stephen Allen and I'm joined today by Chris Burns from CSRB. Tell us a little bit about the business, Chris.
Well, don't forget the letters in the correct order for the name. First of all, I deliberately made that awkward. Yeah, CSRB. I've been around now for nearly 9 years. We are a group of certified data protection officers and specialists focusing on supporting businesses across their three main onboarding procedures in client, employee and supplier, and work with trusted partners.
So I understand that GDPR is a big area and topic for you. I remember many years of us meeting at the Business Network and it was one of your topics of conversation. All these acronyms, I'm going to get used to them by the end of this, I'm sure. But can you tell us a little bit about how you specialise in personal data and protecting it for people?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to it. There's the risk side, which you'll know a little bit about with what you do as well, and minimising and eradicating that risk from organisations. I think there's the other side, which is the more exciting side, which I try and portray, and that's around the growth side of data privacy and how you can grow your business. So, keep those employees that you want to keep by having a rigid employee onboarding procedure, onboarding new clients as well. It can aid with that through marketing channels as well. And then, of course, we've got the trusted partner, making sure that they're aligned to your goals, and security as well, which you'll know a little bit about. So we try and push that. Who wants to be told what they're doing wrong? That's a bit boring, isn't it? So
when we think about compliance, some of those topics don't immediately spring to mind either. So it's interesting. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about Common Ground, where we've met, how we've worked together in the past.
Yeah, I think you alluded to it very well. I think we met at the Lowry Hotel in Manchester at a business networking event. And that was about 7 years ago. The common ground between the two of us, for me, is quite simple. It's progressive companies that want to see clients grow, but also do it in a compliant and secure manner as well. And I think we're both closely aligned on that. And that's where I think this trusted partnership really flourishes. It gives a whole solution around data privacy, cyber security, online security, and obviously provision of IT-related services as well. So we're quite excited about that at CSRB.
It's actually a really good fit for us as well, of course, with us having our compliant, secure support, which is very much around making sure that people have got all the right technology in place to enable them to be able to get some of these certifications. But GDPR, why does it matter? Because there's so many people out there that I hear saying all the time, oh, it just came and it went, nobody cares, but it is still very much around, and why should we care?
Well, my flippant comment to that is it's enshrined by law. So different to European Union, which I know we consulted with our partners to bring GDPR in, and that came in obviously on May the 24th, 2018, GDPR. It actually got put inside the Data Protection Act in the UK, so it's very different, say, from the Republic of Ireland, for example, where it sits as a mere set of guidelines outside of the Irish Data Protection Act. So if you go into Europe, it's a little bit different. It might not be actually encased within law. In the United Kingdom, it is actually law to meet certain individual rights, certain data control and responsibilities. I'll chuck some of those terminologies in for you there, Stephen, as well. And yeah, basically, it is law. So that's your first one. I mean, if that's not enough for you, okay, I can move on to other things. And I always take it back to those three onboarding procedures again. It's not the whole answer to improving all three of those, but it certainly could be 5-10% that might get a new client over the line and make them feel just that little bit more at ease about onboarding with you. So yeah, they're the two that I normally put towards people in a slightly jovial manner, maybe the first one as well.
So where does technology fit for this for you? How important is technology in helping people on that journey?
Oh, tech's massive. I mean, data these days is processed predominantly via online cloud-based sort of data storage. So yeah, we're interested in everything from retention of data, processing of data. We often talk to clients, for example, around putting data into systems, it's still termed as processing under GDPR. Even if you put it into a system, leave it there for 5, 6, 7 years, if you don't do anything with it, you are still legally responsible for the processing of that data. So those systems need to be robust, they need to be compliant, and also they need to have the right access controls and that type of thing on there. And that's where I think the partnership really comes to fruit, because I'm not going to profess to be an expert in that, but I know somebody that is.
So you must see an awful lot of mistakes. What sort of mistakes are people making when it comes to their data?
Oh, a lot. Let's give you a more recent example. May or may not be a client, and I'll obviously keep the name well out of this, but they put all of their data into one system. So they're very heavy on that system. And sometimes we say, well, don't back it up elsewhere. They hadn't got an up-to-date backup. There was a dispute with the supplier of that system. And then suddenly they couldn't get access to their data. A lack of access to data, as I'm sure you're aware, is a personal data breach under the Data Protection Act. So they couldn't get access to the data, affected business continuity. It meant they got 16 staff sat there not being able to do anything when they logged in the morning, and they couldn't deliver their service to their clients. So, we supported them as an external DPO, because that was done before we engaged with them, to say, look, you might want to look at a different procedure and process around that, and also try not to fall out with the people that potentially are providing that software as well. So yeah, tech can be great, but also tech can have limitations if you don't have, I think, a fluid and sort of hybrid strategy around processing your data.
So is there a one tip that you would give people about how to keep it simple when looking at data security?
Yeah, simply data minimization. I mean, I'm just here to protect personal data. So can I identify me or you through an identifier? There's lots of data that we think is personal data, sensitive company data, sales data, that type of thing, a lot of day-to-day business data, but that's not actually covered by the Data Protection Act, so it falls out of my scope. But likewise, it's important data. And I always say to people, yeah, well, one simple tip is store the minimal amount of data that you need to. So use data minimization. If you only need one identifier to get something from A to B, use one identifier, don't take 10 down. The more you bring into your organization, the higher the risk matrix goes up, the more that you've got to do, spend, invest in time. And I love data privacy, but I can think of 9 other things that I'd rather do sometimes than spend the time that I do helping clients out.
How do you manage to stop these people getting overwhelmed with what you're trying to do? Because this is a big area, and interestingly, an area that some people don't even really realize is something they should be actually doing. So when you introduce them to the topic, how do you stop them getting overwhelmed?
I think a lot of the time it's very much about scope, looking at them as individuals. So if it's a sole trader starting up with a new business, don't overwhelm them. Very often they'll have heard all these rumors because they've been in a pub, they've been on Google, they've been on AI, loads of things that they've got to do all of these things. Well, actually, probably they haven't, because A isn't the same as B or the same as C. And it really is a case of doing that like we do, individual customer service, looking at their risk matrix, and then saying, look, these are your key actions to do, and we'll color code that for them. Who doesn't love a traffic light? So we'll color code them for them and focus on those in year one. When you're setting up a business, for example, in this example, who wants to spend money on compliance? You don't. You want to spend it on logos and nice podcasting equipment and stuff like that. That's what you want to spend it on, isn't it?
Well, it's the last thing people think about until it's too late, quite often.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you
So,
you mentioned there AI in
yeah.
what you were saying. Is that making things easier, or is that more of a challenge to things that you're doing?
I think AI has got, and I'm no means an expert on all AI applications, but I think AI has got fantastic opportunity for businesses, especially on the process procedure side of things, the back office. I think people need to just be a little bit wary. There's been no worldwide data protection impact assessment done on AI at the moment that's actually been vetted across the world, even on the likes of Microsoft and Google, those type of people. So if you're going to put any data into AI, I'd just be a little bit wary of where that might be going, how that's retraining other models to give advice. So we do advise our clients at the moment, until we've got some sort of soundboard around that. Don't put personal data into AI. By all means, use it to help you run your business, but keep people's names and whatever out of it, because you're going to lose control over where that data eventually ends up. And you've got to explain that back to your client. So I don't want to frighten people about the use of AI with data privacy, because I think the two will work hand in hand for a very long period of time. And just remember, currently in the UK, we don't have any legislation around AI. It isn't covered by, say, GDPR, for example. Some of the principles of fairness and transparency match up. But at the moment, we're a little bit behind our European partners that have legislated on AI. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll let you decide.
Well, we being a Microsoft house, of course, we tend
Mm.
to recommend people to go down the Copilot route that
Mm.
keeps the data within their own engine rather than going outbound. But do you have any views about the difference between Copilot and some of the other mainstream AI providers?
Yeah, we're a big fan of Copilot for that very reason. I think there's an impact assessment you can do. It's easy to highlight the risks, and it's relatively easy, more importantly, that you've got providers like yourselves that can put a control on that risk. So it's quite good for senior leadership. They can see the benefits of Copilot, but they can also see the risks, but they can also see that it's easily placed under control. I think when you lose that control internally, or say, should we say within the UK, for example, I think it can be a little bit more, you know, it's risk averse, and then people might get a little bit uncomfortable with it. And we see a lot of people at the moment that also, I think there's a lot of myths. So people get really worked up about their data being taken out of the UK, for example. I don't have an issue with data being transferred out of the UK because you can put relevant provisions in your policies, procedures, safeguards in place. It's more about where is it going? Is it going to an approved country, or is it going to a third country that's had no data privacy approval from the regulator, for example? That's the higher risk. So I think things like Copilot are really useful, and we've got a number of clients that like using the Microsoft suite.
So, if we're thinking about GDPR, do you ever see any sort of impact with cybersecurity? How do the two work together? Does it cross your path at all?
They do indeed, yeah. They work hand in hand. They often get confused. And at times I've been asked for advice on cyber security, to which I very quickly go, I've got enough going on in my head. I don't need all that going on as well. But you're right. They work hand in hand. I mean, without boring everyone to death, there's 6 or 7 data processing principles in GDPR. Security only actually gets mentioned as the last word in the 6th data processing principle. So my joke to people is it's great to put a lock on it, which is cybersecurity. I know it's a lot more than that, but lock your data by all means, but make sure you've got compliant data in the first place. So work through those data processing principles. Make sure you know what data you've got, how long are you retaining it for, why are you retaining it, purpose limitation. Don't use it for dual purposes if you haven't got the consent of the individual that you're using it for. Get all those things bottomed down. Very easy. Privacy notice, get that done. People can read it. They'll be reassured. 99% of people won't read it, by the way, but it's there. You've done your bit. And then speak to a professional about cyber security, because the good thing about cybersecurity as well is you can actually get a certification in that. There is no GDPR stamp at the moment. And when people ask me, can we have a GDPR certification? No, you can't. There's a couple that are coming through by the regulator in certain industries like the legal sector, but there is nothing actually that me and you can go and put on our sort of certificate wall at the moment and say we are GDPR compliant. You just have to do the right things that are mentioned within Article 30 of the GDPR. Sorry, that's scientific, isn't it?
Don't worry about it. But I think thinking about everything that you've been saying there, I'm just it's screaming to me the people that don't know anything about this area, the people that are maybe ignoring it, burying the head in the sand. What are the biggest risks that those businesses face that are not really addressing this or doing anything about their
Mm.
compliance?
Yeah, good, really good question. I think the reason that a lot of people, I think it is a case of there's not a lot of knowledge that's shared out there. I mean, we're fortunate. We've a few networks where we get to go to some really good knowledge share seminars, and they do exist. But there's a wider business community, more so in the SME businesses, and where they're immersed in the business and they might not go out networking. The people that are responsible maybe for it have been given dual job roles. Yeah, they might not have the opportunity to go to those things. So it is about where do they learn this? So the senior leadership team does need to take some responsibility there and make sure that if you're going to give a rollout internally, or at least put some training provision in around GDPR, so that you're helping your own business, but secondly to that, the risks that are involved. And I think also it's the main risks, is going back to your direct question, is around those 3 onboarding procedures. You want to retain good people in your business. You don't want to lose them. So make sure you've got an employee privacy notice in place. Make sure they know their responsibilities when they're working for you, because they're handling your client's data. You need to look after their data as well. They're just as important as an employee. Do that, get them on board, make sure there's a bit of training in their induction plan, for example. And on the client side, Matt, if I have 50p or a quid, how old am I, 50p? But if you had that, every time I was told that, GDPR stops me marketing my business, I won't swear, rubbish, because GDPR you can pretty much do what you want with it. with a certain caveat of it's got to be lawful, it's got to be fair, and it's got to be transparent. And by transparent, you just need to tell people about it in your privacy notice. So I can show you how we can amend your privacy notice to probably go and generate more leads, more referrals, but you just need to put the right wording in. So it's about not knowing that those things are there. I think they become risks because your competitors will outgrow you.
So interesting then, with the clients you've worked with,
Mm.
I'm sure you take skeptics to a point where they actually understand and they see some benefits. So for those people, what would you say are the main things that they notice when compliance is done well?
I think a lot of it's about relevance as well. I think the problem is with, and this is a massive problem, say with training that I've just mentioned around data privacy and GDPR. I think there was a lot of the two things on that. There was in May the 24th, 2018, and the media did an exceptionally good job, I'm stereotyping here, of running with the fact that none of us would ever be able to email again, for example, and they used consent, which is only one of the 6 lawful reasons that you can process someone's data. And actually, it's the least used, by the way, in the UK as well. Most of us use contract, legitimate interest, or legal obligation to process people's personal data. So I think there was a lot of fear right from the get-go, and I think that's been a bit of a barrier that we're still breaking down, not quite 10 years later, but we're sort of 7, 8 years later. So I think there's an issue there, particularly what we try and break down with people and making it relevant to them and their business. So yeah, where I delivered some training only last week to train 2 people up within their own organisation to be, God forbid, mini versions of me, data protection officers. So there was 2 people on the call. We did 4 modules online, but I immersed myself in their market sector to find out, are they members of any codes of conduct, codes of practice? Are they regulated? Can I meet the marketing manager? Can I meet the HR manager? Because I need to know what their problems are. And then we based the training, yes, around the fundamentals of data privacy, but gave real examples of what they do on a day-to-day basis. And I think if you make things relevant, people engage with it. If you just go and sit on a GDPR module for an hour, I mean, God forbid, I did one for the NHS very recently, and because I volunteer at the NHS, and it was still quoting the 1998 Data Protection Act. But anyway, I've got a new client, so it's not that bad, is it?
It's interesting because this is a topic that we come up against all the time. And people, much like you're getting asked about cybersecurity, we get asked about your topics. And we're not experts in it. We've engaged your services to make sure that we've got all the right things in place.
Absolutely.
But I would always recommend somebody to use your services. But before they get to that point, what would be the one practical tip that you could give them to get started on this?
Yeah, one practical tip I say is around the privacy notice, and I'd say just document down how you process people's personal data, how you look after it, what you're going to do with it. It doesn't have to be War and Peace. Just get yourself a sheet of paper if you're old school, or get yourself a tablet or whatever your thing is, and just write that down. And then what you need to ask yourself is, would I be happy with that? If that was my personal data, would I be happy with my data processed in that way? If you can answer yes confidently, brilliant. Write that down. There's your privacy notice. There's a bit more around it than that. If you can't answer that question confidently, or you stutter or whatever, at that point you probably need to look at what risks are written down there and maybe do a bit more investigation. It's a very simple step, and it's about being honest with yourself. And when I'm saying yourself, I'm saying as an organisation, what do we do? What do we want to do? How can we do it safely and securely? And have we got the right trusted partners available that can help us do that? And I think if you do that and ask yourself those 3 or 4 questions, it's a 5-10 minute exercise. You'll make the whole thing a lot less stressful than you think it is beforehand. There's more to that, obviously, but that would be my first step.
And I'm interested to hear actually a bit about, you mentioned certifications that are coming to the compliance sector, but we of course in cybersecurity have Cyber Essentials, which we recommend that all of our clients at least go through the self-certification of, if not more with the Cyber Essentials Plus. But where do you see that fitting into the bigger picture of compliance from, I'm thinking here, the Essentials certification?
Again, I think I'd relate that back to client onboarding procedures. I think you've got to make it relevant to people that are investing the money in these certifications. They can certainly see the security benefits. I'm sure they're outlined. But if you want to get onto certain tender frameworks these days, if you want to deal with the public sector, if you want to bring on blue chip companies as clients, very often our minimum requirement will be: can we see your they'll call it a GDPR policy, a privacy policy. It's not for me to correct the terminology, but I'll give them whatever they want to call it. But then we'll get asked, we'll advise them and say, you know, have you got cyber essentials? You know, if you've got cyber essentials, what's the reason for not looking at plus? You know, and then you might even want to go down a higher standard route to ISO 27001 and those type of things. So I think they are really important. They're not just, you know, badges on the wall when you walk in at reception that people look at like a health and safety certificate because you've got to display it. They're very important things, and you should shout about it as well. The amount of people that get Cyber Essentials, get Cyber Essentials Plus, you know, you can't even find it on their website or whatever. Go and tell, write blogs on it, do social media on it. Let your prospects know we've got this. You know, it might only be 5% that gets you over the line, but hey, why miss that 5% out?
It's interesting you say that, because maybe we should be recommending to our clients to shout about it, because we often position it as the peace of mind for the business owner that they're doing all of the right
Mm.
things when it comes to cyber security and they've got the right measures in place. But yeah, other people do want to know about, as you say, tendering's the obvious one that they always want to know if you've got it or not. But quite often, just average clients want to know that you've got it in place. But could you give some sort of examples of people misunderstanding data security and compliance?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Somebody said to me the other day, they said they listed off a number of different things that they do. And then they went, "Oh, but because we don't do that anymore with that data, we don't need to be compliant." And I'm like going, "Yeah, but you've still got the data, haven't you, in your software systems?" They went, "Yeah, but we don't use it for that anymore." I go, "No, but you've still got people's personal data." And they were like, "Yeah, they just..." And I really had to we went through a number of different layering question techniques to break it down and make them understand that if you've got people's personal data, you are legally responsible for it, whether you're using it, whether you are not using it, whether think you've deleted it. Another common mistake that will come across, and you guys will come across this a lot of the time, is that people will delete data off their spreadsheet, but if there's archives or there's backups somewhere, that can be part of a dispute when there's a data subject access request, for example. This could put extra time when you've got to respond to one of those, which is a legal requirement. You've got 30 days unless you can put an exemption in place to respond to this. It can take a lot of downtime for organisations, especially the larger organisations. And obviously, I always say to people, it depends. If you're a small client, if you're, say, 1 to 10 employees, you're probably going to have a risk matrix that's relatively small, hopefully. But the larger amounts of data you process, whether that's volumes of clients, volumes of employees, mixture of both, you're going to have a higher risk matrix. So people really do need to look at the data that they've got, the systems they've got, you know, who's got access to that. I mean, another one I spoke to about access control the other day as well, and I said, have you got an access control policy? We don't generally draft those. They're normally part of the information security suite. But I said to them, "Look, where's your information security policy?" And who knows, that may or may not be an upcoming referral from someone sat not too far from me now. But
So where does the ICO come into all of this? How do they oversee all of it, including compliance
mm,
and cyber security?
yeah, so the ICO, and for those that don't know, Information Commissioner's Office, they're the regulator, and basically what they're supposed to do is, that sounded a bit tongue in cheek, ICO, if you're listening, but it's uphold data interests, pretty much. Make sure that our rights and freedoms as individuals, and all of us here have got those rights and freedoms that need protecting. So they sit there as a sort of, you know, an arm that looks after personal data transactions in the UK. Obviously, they're only a certain size, they've only got a certain resource, but their job is to put informed advice out there and disseminate the legislation down into hopefully manageable and understandable chunks of advice that normally people like ourselves, practitioners, can then further simplify and make relevant to business owners. And that's the job of the ICO as I see it. The ICO often get a bad rep because they're there to fine people or put enforcement action. Actually, the ICO don't fine a very large percentage of people at all. It's a very small percentage. When they do, they're more likely to come back and ask you just to get your house in order and come back and do that by a deadline than they are to fine you. So I think people see them as a big bad wolf, but they're not. They're not really. They're just there to help, and they've actually got some fantastic resource. I mean, good luck finding it on their website, but I mean, they've got a fantastic resource. And for those listening, there's a great SME hub on the ICO website. Lots of really good templates and whatever there, so you can have a stab at some of this stuff yourself, and then you don't have to pay our reassuringly high expensive costs, you know, so you can do that.
So I think when all of this started with GDPR, the initial thing was the fear factor of the
Mm,
fines. You're saying there that really the fines have not really, they're not really fining people unless they're making repeated, having repeated breaches or
Mm.
not handling the data in the right way. But moreover, really, how does that compare with reputational damage? Because I see that really is probably more of the bigger thing, really, for people having breaches and in their data is the damage it causes.
Yeah, absolutely, and you're totally right. I mean, if we go back to the example we alluded to, how did we first meet, which was at a networking event, and the main reason that most of us go networking is to build a reputation that people can trust in order to pass us future referrals. So it's all based on trust. As soon as there's a bit like a game of Jenga, as soon as people start knocking bricks out of that trust wall, it is a little bit hard, and you've got to do extra work, and that is your reputational damage. Think of it like Jenga and people taking bricks away, and they're chinks out of your armour. So I would say no, reputational damage is huge, and I would say to businesses, it's actually larger than enforcement action. It really is. Very often, even in some of the biggest data breaches we've had in recent years, and we've had, British Airways, for example, had a big one fairly a good few years ago. Morrison's even further back. And there's been a number of different big brands and some smaller ones as well, just in case there's any lawyers listening as well. But they were published on the ICO's website, so we can quote those. And they were down to the fact that there were certain things that weren't in place. They are in place now to protect people. And I think, but the reputational damage, I would imagine that there would have been a lot of customer mistrust with those bigger brands. I'm not sure what did happen, but I know there was large chinks in share prices and at the top boardroom level, but down on a local level, somebody might have been making a choice of who to fly with or where to go and buy their groceries, for example, and they might just have gone somewhere else for a short period of time.
It's interesting you touch on that because I was going to ask you about what the hidden costs are of
Mm.
having a breach.
Mm. The main one is your time. I always say to people, they want to talk about cost, and I say, well, if you want to talk about cost, I mean, we may all have an hourly rate. Okay, some of us can quantify it in that manner, some of us can't. Even at work, if you're a PAYE, you'll generally get paid a rate an hour. So, that is your real cost. It's the downtime of coming away from your day-to-day business activity, which is how you grow the business and move the organisation forward. And even if you're a non-for-profit, even if you're a charity, and we work with a number of different charities, it's not being out there to do fundraising activities or not being able to attend trustee meetings because you're having to deal with this. You might have a part-time trustee job if you're a charity, as well as a full-time job as well. So you might have a number of different things. So it's taking it away from what you do really well, and you've now got to deal with this. So that is your real cost. And then if you don't deal with that because you've got little knowledge and you haven't brought in trusted partners to help you with that, you're going back to the reputational damage piece then, because you're going to try and put a sticky plaster on it and you're not going to do a very good job because guess what? You're not trained to do it. So again, you could exacerbate that reputational damage and that sort of cost of time by having to go again. So work with trusted partners and be honest. Yeah, if you don't know about it and you're panicking, go and speak to someone that does know about it. It's a lot easier.
It's an interesting question you talked there about the people.
Mm.
How do you actually get buy-in from the people within the companies that you're working with when they've got their own agendas of their day jobs that they're needing to concentrate on? What makes them buy into cybersecurity and
Mm.
compliance?
Yeah, a good question again. I think a number of the things I've touched on already. You've got to, yes, there's the risk element of it. You can have a look at a gap analysis and see if there's a risk there, because likewise, I'm not one for positioning things that people don't need either. Money isn't infinite for people, neither is their time. But I think you should look at any risks. Obviously, there should be a commercial aspect to this as well. I say to people, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't all do it once. I was in sales for 25 years before, and I've come into compliance from the route that you wouldn't normally expect, the big bad sales wolf. So I want to be there to help you grow your business. So I'm not going to advise something that you don't need, but I am going to make sure you know the risks of doing things that you're doing. And you should also make sure then that you've got robust cybersecurity in place as well, because your data is key. It's probably of your people, and your people are more broad than the people inside your office. They are your stakeholders, they are your customers, they are your prospects, they are your suppliers, and you need to look after all of those people. And that sounds quite a lot when you say it out loud. So why not work with trusted partners that can, just take that burden off you a little bit?
It's interesting because culture plays a big part in this, and this is something we see in pretty much everything that we do here at Linton. The the culture that we have in our workforce, it's really important to make sure that people are happy, they enjoy what they're doing, because ultimately then they support our clients in the right way. Do you find that working with companies where they have a good or a bad culture influences the work that you can do?
Yeah, I think it'll be the same probably for all of us, I would imagine. You want to work with good people. And by good people, I mean not what they do out of work. You want them to have the right value set, you want them to have the right ambitions, and you want them to understand that perhaps this stuff isn't, yeah, the most exciting stuff in the world, but it is business critical. They've got certain responsibilities, and you want them to be accountable. And that's all I ask of people. I say, look, you whether you like it or not. Going back, you asked me earlier on, why should they do this? Well, because it's the law. If that isn't a good enough answer for you, you're probably not the right client for CSRB, for example, because it means you're either sweeping it under the carpet. Then we don't want to work with those people, or you need a bit more persuasive learning or something along those lines, which we're happy to maybe do and assist you with. But I would say a lot of the time, it comes back to not people not sweeping under the carpet. I just think people are scared. Going back to another point we made earlier on, because there's also a lot of misinformation out there as well, and I think misinformation can affect culture because it makes people, I think, at senior leadership, maybe a bit more risk averse of investing in that because, oh, we don't really need to do that, or we've heard this and whatever. And then at the lower, not everyone's part of the team. I don't mean in levels of hierarchy, but I think as you disseminate down through the team, if it's not then been seen as important by the senior leadership because they've been a bit risk averse because of things they've heard, there isn't that culture in place of privacy. And going back to the employee onboarding piece, if you know that you've got that embedded in your culture, you're going to include that as part of your induction pack, and you'll do it seamlessly. It will just be one part of the induction pack. And then everybody that comes into the organization moving forward will be part of that intertwined culture of security, information security. And I think that's the way we want to get with all of our clients that we work with.
Yeah, I would imagine you start with the SLT and the business owners, but you have quite a large interaction with the IT teams, either outsourced or internal.
Mm.
Because I know when we've engaged in these kind of projects before, we get our clients send us questionnaires to fill in on their behalf
Mm.
of the things that they need to know about the infrastructure. Well, where do you see the biggest disconnect between those IT teams and compliance?
I think I think it's different sometimes from when somebody's got an external IT supplier to, and this is me with just data protection officer hat on experience. I think when someone's got an internal team, it can be sometimes harder actually to penetrate that than it can be when they've got an external team. Even if the external team, in our opinion, could, if it was changed to other people, could be slightly better and enhance that experience. But let's just presume that we're talking about a really good example. We have very strong relationships with IT teams, and you're right, because you know information security and data privacy are intertwined. They have to be. But we also have to pull in other people in the business. We have very good relationships with HR departments. We have very good relationships with legal and compliance. We have very good relationships with marketing managers because they are generally the data centric heavy areas of the business. It's up to us as IT and data privacy to make sure that we can put the relevant controls over to them in language that they understand that doesn't take up their time. So yes, we work very closely. We'd like to work closer sometimes with some IT teams that we get the opportunity to. And I think it is very frustrating. And I have stepped away from clients before where they don't give us the access to the people that we need to speak to. Because one of the fundamentals of a data protection officer role is it's a legal role. So we report in at board level. And that's not diminishing anybody further down the food chain. We'll talk to anybody. But ultimately, the people that are responsible are the people that sit at senior leadership. The regulator will come back to those people. It might not be something that might have been done by somebody else in the organization, but they will come back to the senior leadership. So we have to be able to speak to those people on a one-to-one basis. And if we can't, or I feel I'm being blocked, or somebody wants to put themselves in an important ivory tower, that's fine. Go sit in your ivory tower. But I will take my business and my brand away from that client.
Why would they want to do that? Because my understanding is they're on the hook for it. They're
Mhm.
responsible for it. So as the senior leadership team or the owners of the business, they have to make sure that they've got all the right things in place. Because if they haven't ticked those boxes and something happens, they're going to come straight after them.
Yeah, I think a number of different things. If I was being flippant, I'd say ego. Sometimes I think ego is, there are people before that I've moved on because I just don't think I'm a fairly good judge of character, and I'm sure we all are, but I just don't think I can move that needle. It is where they are, and if they want to be that way, that's fine. You crack on with it. I've got no problem with anybody having a different opinion to me, but it doesn't mean I have to listen to it the whole time. So I'm happy to move those people on. And I think on another level, I think a lot of it's fear. I think it's fear of the time that it's going to take, as we alluded to earlier on, and I think it's a fear of the impact and the cost on the business that it'll have. And I don't mean that in necessarily a negative sense. I think an example of that might be they're a growing team. The team that is there at the moment are at fairly full capacity. They would love to take more either external or internal support on, but perhaps the budget isn't quite in place at the moment, and they know they need to do this, but I think there's a fear there of, spending that money now isn't, in their opinion, the right time to do it. So it's about, okay, how can we give them some, point them towards some material that we've got that's free at that time. I'd rather help somebody out. And that's what I love about the business networking opportunities, is if I can just help someone out, and I'm sure you have it. Sometimes our clients are people that we've known for a long period of time, and it hasn't bothered me that they haven't been clients for the last 5 years because we've kept in contact. And if I could have just helped them out with something 4 years ago, most people, if they're good business owners, will remember that, and they'll come back to you. And I think that gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling inside, doesn't it? That's quite nice.
So what can those businesses do to create a unified approach to their compliance and cybersecurity?
I think it's about bringing all the stakeholders together. I think very often people are very good at appointing external teams, and across all those sort of different areas that I said at the moment. But you have to bring those teams together. If you have got external, you know, ICT support, if you have got external legal support, if you have got external HR support, accountancy, data privacy, I could go on web, digital. Bring those. I'm not saying they have to meet every 5 minutes, but I'm just saying if there's a major project going on, there's a new website with some form of e-commerce built into it, for example, the likelihood is there you're probably going to need to speak to your information security experts. There's probably going to be a different way of processing data, so your data protection officer might want to know about it and do a risk assessment on it before you actually build it. And probably you as the client might want to know about these risks before you spend the money with those relevant partners. So it is about, I think, trying to get ahead of the curve, and dealing with these things up front and making sure that people work together. And don't be scared about introducing people to people. If you're really worried about that, hey, I'll draft you a data sharing agreement. It's not a problem.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I've got a segment now that you may or may not know anything about, but this is our bright insight.
Oh,
So Jamie's going to bring us the bright idea. It doesn't normally glow when it's over my head, but I'm feeling in a good mood today. So let's make it glow for me. But
good.
what I'm going to ask you today is I'm going to hand you our bright insight bulb. And I'm going to ask you for one piece of wisdom or something that you do that in your business that simplifies or reduces your need in technology. Something, a bright idea for technology that you could tell our viewers about today.
Oh, bright idea for technology. Okay, right. I think, yeah, I mean, again, I think we use a lot of sort of booking apps and stuff like that as well. I think for making your business a little bit easier. But remember, they store data. So what we do is just have a look at data, where your data's going. So, for example, if you don't want to use transfer data, don't transfer via email, is what I'm pretty much saying here. Long-winded way about it, which doesn't seem like a great technology idea. However, there are great pieces of tech out there that you can use. So you've got the Microsoft suite where you can share things via SharePoint, that type of thing. There's a lot of functionality within those type of pieces of software for access control, for getting things out to people. It doesn't have to be boring documents. We share a lot of training guides and whatever with relevant teams. So we use a lot of stuff like that. And even data transfer mechanisms outside of that. WeTransfer we use to give them a shout out. They're actually Dutch, but they've got really rigid EU security. So we say that what we want to try and do is try and get all personal data off of emails and into some form of bright technology. I've mentioned some really big ticket items there in Microsoft and gone easy, because whilst I know a little bit about tech, I'm not really a man for too many different applications.
It's brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Chris. But
Yeah.
I think what I would like now, if I can, is we've heard a little bit about your business. I would like our viewers to hear a little bit about you and understand you as a person. So I'm going to ask you a few quick fire questions if you can. These are really almost one word answers, but
Okay.
if I was to say a morning person or a night owl,
Morning.
wine or beer,
Beer.
coffee or tea,
Coffee.
sunrise or sunset,
Do love a sunrise.
book or movie,
Book.
beach or city,
City.
pizza or pasta.
Pizza.
And then my favorite question, Microsoft or Apple?
Microsoft.
Good answer. So thank you very much for joining me today, Chris. But can I just ask if you can tell people how they can contact you if they've got any more questions about their data compliance and security?
Yeah, you can find more details about us at csrb.co.uk. You can call us on 01173 250 830. And you can also find us on LinkedIn as well. Just put CSRB and it will come up as personal data specialists on your search there as well. And by all means, if you want to connect with me, my name's Chris Byrne and you'll find me on there as well.
And then one final question.
Good.
What's next for CSRB?
We are into 2026 building our strategic partnerships. We've been doing that over the last 5 or 6 years. So that's one thing we've got momentum with at the moment, and we really do value it. And that's got to be a two-way street, by the way. So it's not just about, what can they do for CSRB and our clients. It's about what can we do for them and their clients as well. So yeah, strategic